Good afternoon. I call to order the February 13th, 2024 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. For the record, my name is Kimberly Sambolt, and I serve as Vice Chair of the Commission. I am filling in tonight for Chair Howard, who let us know of her absence prior to this evening. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices and to speak clearly into the microphone when speaking at the dais or giving testimony. Would the clerk please call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum?
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Present.
Booty.
Present.
Fisher.
Present.
Hare.
Present.
Howard is absent. Melblom.
Present.
Merrill.
Present.
Chair Sandbolt.
Present.
Maston.
Present.
There are 8 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have quorum and that Commissioner Howard provided proper notice that she has a conflict and her absence is excused. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We will work from the agendas that are available by the clerk. The proposed agenda is item number the following items will have staff presentation and commission discussion without a public hearing. Item number 4, Dinkytown Commercial Historic District Design Guidelines. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
Booty so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Booty. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. All in favor, or any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Bjornberg so moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Merrill. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? I have to abstain. I was absent from the previous meeting.
Melblom abstains.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. The minutes then are approved. So now moving on to our agenda items. Our agenda item is item number 4, Dinkytown Commercial Historic District Design Guidelines. The staff memo will be presented by Rob Skalecki.
Thank you, Chair Sandbolt. And good afternoon, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rob Skalecki. I'm a Senior City Planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. And today I'm here in front of you to present the very long-awaited Dinkytown Commercial Historic District Design Guidelines. In the staff memo to Commissioners, we did use kind of the first page of that to give a pretty in-depth background of what happened since the district was designated in 2015 to get to this point. So I'm just going to go over that a little bit and then get into the guidelines, and we're very excited to hear your comments that you have on those. So as the memo stated, the Dinkytown Commercial Historic District was designated by City Council in 2015. The district that was ultimately adopted by City Council, however, did differ from the original recommendation to the Heritage Preservation Commission for the district. So the designation study that was drafted in 2015 had recommended a longer period of significance for the district, which went from 1899 to 1972. But 2 geographical boundaries and areas of significance were also pinpointed within that span of years. So that was the streetcar era, which was 1899 to 1929, and the streetcar era and post-war era inclusive, which went from 1899 to 1972. So again, these were suggested as part of the designation study. And just to note that the streetcar era boundaries do fit entirely within those later dates for the post-war era inclusive boundaries. The district with the proposed 1899 to 1972 boundaries and significance was proposed and approved at the HPC's June 9th, 2015 meeting. Council amendments did occur through the process, though, and this is kind of detailed in the memo that staff wrote. And in the end, what was designated was only from that streetcar era, so 1899 to 1929. And staff did include the official council resolution and amendment in the attachments for commissioners to reference. Also, just a note about contributing and non-contributing buildings, because this is something that did come up a decent amount through our engagement that we did for this work. Earlier, contributing and non-contributing resource determinations were made in the designation study while the district was being studied for a longer period of significance. So that was from the 1899 to 1972 period of significance. So as a result, in the original designation documents in that study, more resources were deemed contributing, and that's because their histories from 1930 to 1972 could be considered when it was studied. So since council designated it for a shorter period of significance, again, the properties need to be reevaluated by staff essentially to make sure that the contributing and non-contributing status of buildings could be supported through evidence. And this kind of reevaluation of that was completed by staff of our preservation team through a decent amount of research to make sure that we really have the correct dates of constructions and alterations to those buildings. So a lot of the buildings that had alterations after 1929 or were built after 1929 really couldn't be recognized for contributing status as they were originally when it was studied for designation. Since 2015, so since the district was designated, the City of Minneapolis has used the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation to evaluate changes to the commercial historic district. There were previous drafts of design guidelines that were developed since that time, but none of these drafts were really able to capture the complex nature of the district's designation, meet community input, and the guideline drafts that were produced from that really didn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation out of that. So in late 2023, CPUD held two public meetings. I believe one was in November and one in December. One was in person at the Southeast Library and one was virtual. And through these meetings, we really wanted to get community feedback on the draft that we had drafted up to that point. So staff did receive comments from community members, and we had an online forum, and I believe that's maybe still up. But we have community input from that we incorporated into the recent draft that you are seeing and reviewing today. And comments specific to the draft documents content that were, very pointed to what they were referencing within those guidelines were taken into account. So those changes were made, and those should be reflected in the current draft that you reviewed. As I mentioned briefly, we did receive a lot of community comments and concerns about the revised contributing and non-contributing status of buildings, the district's period of significance, the boundaries, and really just past work that was completed for other drafts of guidelines. Staff did receive a good summary of this from a lot of involved community members, and that it was included in the attachments as well, and you can kind of understand the points that were made through that. So our team understands the unusual circumstances that took place to designate this district for that smaller period of significance in 2015, and understanding that and understanding the community involvement in this district. That's why we approached it the way we did and wrote them the way we did, and that's reflected in the document that you reviewed. So the guidelines draft offer guidance on existing buildings and new construction. The guidelines don't differentiate between contributing and non-contributing buildings to emphasize the existing historic features. And this is to allow flexibility to accommodate community member concerns about the contributing and non-contributing status of buildings. We also decided to take this approach since many of the district's buildings have had alterations since that 1899 to 1929 period. and that makes traditional design review processes through contributing or non-contributing status quite difficult when we're reviewing projects. So treatment guidance for existing buildings is recommended equally for all properties in the district to manage change and to preserve the integrity of the district. Staff would like to note that this really shouldn't be seen as unusual, since the Secretary of the Interior standards also do not prescribe different treatments depending on a building's contributing or non-contributing status. And we hope that the existing buildings and new construction categories that we divided the guidelines into will hopefully make the document easier to approach for users. So, in the past, some of our guidelines are organized by, contributing buildings or existing buildings and new construction, or the wording often causes confusion with community members. So this way, if you have a building, it's an existing building, and you defer to those guidelines. And if you're looking to build something new, that would be new construction, and you would go to that section of the guidelines. Subsections are further categorized by building features such as fenestration, roofs, walls, and ghost signs. There are also separate sections for mechanical equipment and trash enclosures and public realm infrastructure. And this layout was really chosen to fit the need of this very unique historic district. So staff are requesting the HPC's comments on the organization, on specific guidance, on readability. Do the guidelines make sense? Are there areas that you would like to see clarified? And also, looking at the graphics, do those serve a purpose? Are there any other things that you think staff could add for visuals? So with that, I'll leave that up to you all, and I'll be happy to take any comments or questions you have.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Skalecki. Commissioners, are there any comments or questions for staff? Commissioner Melbloom?
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandvold. Mr. Skalecki, I have a question. On page 7 of the guidelines, there's the district map that was approved at the City Council in 2015. And it has a couple of things. So my first question is it unusual to have a district be non-contiguous? There's one piece that's completely separated from the rest of the district, which seems a little, I guess, odd to me, but maybe that's not odd.
Chair Sandvold, Commissioner Melbloom, it's not too common within the city's historic districts. I would say the majority of our historic districts are contiguous, but there are a handful of districts that are not contiguous and have properties in different areas. So that is, I would say it's not unusual. It's just not, as common as a contiguous district, so.
Okay. And then the second question about that map is, it obviously includes some of the bridges, and then I think those bridges are going over the train tracks, if I remember correctly. Is the area within the district just the bridges, or does it actually include the space that the train tracks are in, and can the city actually have jurisdiction over that space on the ground where the train tracks are?
It's a good question, Commissioner Melbourne. It's my understanding that the district boundaries technically do include that area. I will admit it is difficult for staff to be able to regulate spaces like that, public right-of-way spaces that have different ownership, that are public spaces. So with that in mind, that is how we approached the public realm section. But it's my understanding that the district was designated with those parts included in the boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Booty?
Thank you, Vice Chair Sample. I had a question, more of a clarification about some of the language around contributing versus non-contributing, because I believe in your staff report you'd said that you had not been treating either. You've been reviewing new construction and historic properties almost kind of similarly, or there was a note you had about the non-contributing buildings as you were not necessarily considering them non-contributing, and then in the report they had kind of that distinction in the in the guidelines that had that distinction. So I was curious if you could elaborate more on that.
Yeah, Chair Samble and Commissioner Booty, I think I understand what you're saying. I think, that's something that staff struggles with too, just how the district was designated, trying to figure out where's that balance. We understand that a lot of buildings have been changed since that end date of the period of significance. We understand that there were a lot of community member concerns about making adjustments to what was in the original designation study. So that is why we approached it, understanding that there have to be these non-contributing buildings based on the evidence of changes we know occurred. But understanding that, even within the handful of non-contributing buildings, there's still historic features that date from within the period of significance. So we're talking about, a handful of buildings that had major alterations, but may still have historic materials present. So that's why we approached it the way we did with, understanding there are contributing and non-contributing buildings, but at the same time, there's greater flexibility with allowing the guidelines to be divided by, looking at historic and non-historic materials on existing buildings. So that's the approach we took, and I hope that answered your question.
That does. Thank you.
Commissioner Bjornberg?
Thank you, Vice Chair Sample. I have a question about sort of the process in terms of, you said that there were 2 community meetings. Did you bring draft guidelines to those community meetings and then receive feedback specifically on that draft? Or can you talk a little bit about how you approached community feedback and then integrated it into this?
Sure, Chair or Vice Chair Sandbolt and Commissioner Bjornberg. I believe the first meeting we did not have a draft present. At that point, I think we were just kind of gathering community member input, trying to gauge, what had been done in the past, what concerns might be present before we would, put a document out at that point. And I think we addressed the comments, and my other staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the case for the first meeting. It was just kind of the in-person introductory meeting of, what this is, why we're doing this. By that time, we had already received a few, members of the public reaching out about the guidelines, kind of anticipating when they might be drafted, and there are a few involved community members who have been, working on this since it was designated. So they, any kind of development in that they were interested to hear about. By the time we did the second meeting, that's when we did have a draft available for community members to look at. And I think from that point, we encouraged comments on the content of the guidelines and how we organize them and what was in there. So we kind of split it in half. I think the first one kind of just introducing what we're doing, the second one focusing a bit more on the actual guidelines, and then from there taking comments that were submitted.
All right, Mr. Skalaki, I have a couple of questions of my own. I noticed that brick is the required exterior material. Did that come up in the community engagement meetings at all, or did you receive any feedback about that particular guideline?
Chair Samble, would you be willing to maybe point to the page that you're referencing? Is this for new construction? Is that correct?
Yes, for new construction, as well as I think some existing. Let me find the page.
I do see for at least additions, we did have brick and stucco as appropriate materials, and that's based on the materials that are present in the district that are historic. So that was something that staff decided that we would include administratively. And we haven't received any comments on that yet from community members. If commissioners would like to see other alternatives explored or think there are other materials that could be compatible to this district, we'd be willing to hear what your thoughts are.
Okay, I was just mostly curious if that was like direct feedback. And then it does say also in item 2.14, new buildings in the district shall primarily use brick in a contemporary size to ensure compatibility while not creating a false sense of history. Applied stucco, 2.15 is applied stucco with a contemporary finish shall be permitted. And then 2.16 is metal panels are prohibited. So I just thought that was interesting to be very particular about the materials being allowed for new construction, and I was just wondering if there was community feedback on that. And we as a board will discuss in a moment. Another question I had was regarding the period of significance. Just based on the kind of contentiousness of how this kind of got approved, and then it seemed, contributing versus non-contributing. I was wondering if in doing the design guidelines, if that is or is not an appropriate time to be reconsidering a period of significance, or if that came up in any of the community engagement and discussions that you had about maybe reconsidering that, and if that would be an appropriate time for that kind of consideration or not.
Thank you, Chair Sandwell. And that is something that has come up. The reason we can't, consider it now, and kind of the biggest reason is that it is written into the resolution. That is pretty unusual for historic districts to have the resolution itself reference a period of significance. So, we have heard from the community that there's interest in exploring what something else might look like. And our team too is exploring, is that possible? How would that go about being changed if that's something that would, be someone's initiative? So we've looked into that. And again, unfortunately, because it's, written into the resolution, it's very clear about how and when this was designated that this is going to be the period of significance. It's not something that we could really consider through design guidelines, and usually, kind of like with recent work for resurveying the Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District, where, these older districts didn't have distinct periods of significance. Usually that's something that can be supported by evidence and brought to the HPC on a staff recommendation, and kind of changed that way. But I think because this one's a bit different, it's something that we've talked to community members about, and it's something that we would have to look at through a different way too.
So did you determine what the process would be? Would it be essentially establishing a new district or a different, like, overlay district kind of to establish a different period of significance?
I think our team is still looking into that.
Okay.
And I don't know if other staff have comments on that as well. I think we have some ideas of how we might approach it if it does come forward. But at this point, we're really only focusing on the design guidelines based on the period of significance that we have, and that's what we can do right now. So that's about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Andrea Burke, it looks like you have a few comments on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandbolt. Yes, I want to provide just a couple points of clarification just on some of the discussion that I've been hearing. Rob's done a great job explaining everything. I just want to add a couple points. I guess I'll work my way backwards on the period of significance. Rob is correct. Essentially, we don't have a process for it right now written into our ordinance. Rob and I have talked a little bit about ways that could be possible, but to his point, our main focus is the period of significance that we have. Like he said, it's very unusual that it's written into the resolution, so we are required to abide by it. And our primary goal is to get design guidelines adopted, but it is on our radar as something that we're looking into. So to that point, also for, I have here new construction materials, and I was going to say something to that effect, but now I can't remember what it was, so forgive me. I'm going to jump forward to the other part. On the community meetings, just adding a couple points to what Rob said. At the first meeting, we did have a draft of the design guidelines, but a lot of the comments that we had received from the community focused on the contributing and the non-contributing status. And so the primary goals of that first meeting in November, which was held on the 2nd of November, was to basically bring people back to start. It's been a long time since we've talked about this document. Let's talk about how we got here again. Let's come at it high level and explain and try to address some of those concerns that we had been hearing about from the community to try and provide some information to give to that, but then also to provide an introduction to the guidelines and sort of start to orient people to how this document is laid out, what it includes, what it's about, what they're meant for. And then we did have, from there, then we provided some opportunities as a way to get feedback to us about them. And then the second meeting focused a little bit more heavily on the design guidelines and their content. So that just adds a little bit more to that part. And I still can't remember what I was going to say about new construction materials. So that is all for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke, for providing a little additional clarity around some of those things. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions, or we can also kind of move into giving more general feedback and kind of comments and feedback to Mr. Skalecki. Commissioner Maston.
Yes, I think in terms of the guidelines themselves with the existing versus new, I thought it was clearly written. I thought that was effective. I think my questions that I had were more focused on the guidelines. I guess it was based on the resolution, the boundaries, sorry, there's the word, the boundaries and the dates. And it sounds like that ship has sailed. That's not a discussion point at this point. If it had been up to staff, would you have revised either of those? Not to put you on the spot too much, but I'm curious because I think it is part of this discussion.
Yeah, Commissioner Maston, thanks for the question. That's not really something that we, it's not up to us. It's not, I think there's a bunch of wish list items for different historic properties throughout the city, but
Yeah.
Just understanding what we had to work with and how we had to approach it. That's exactly our mindset when we came into figuring out what a draft would look like for this. So.
If either of those were expanded, do you think these guidelines would still be complete and representative of what you'd want the guidelines to say for expanded districts?
I believe there's enough flexibility, and just listening to community member concerns about, how Dinkytown's history really developed into the post-war era and how, that was written into part of the resolution amendment that you try to capture this eclectic character of,
Right.
of Dinkytown. So that is also one of the things that we thought of that, the guidelines as written currently, we believe could apply to, a longer period of significance if needed.
Or a larger
There is
area.
just that type of flexibility. And we hope that kind of came out in the draft.
Okay, thank you. Not to put you on the spot too much, I apologize.
Commissioner Hare.
There we go. Thank you, Vice Chair Sambolt. Mr. Skalecki, I see additions fall within the existing guidelines. I was just wondering about the clarity of if an addition is to be placed. I know the Secretary of the Interior Standards give some guidance on that. But should the existing guidelines or new construction guidelines be used in the case of an addition?
So, Chair Sample, Commissioner Hare. That's, I think we assume that, you know, additions are going to happen to existing buildings, so that's why we categorized it there. I could see, you know, if you're reading through this and there's a section on, you know, windows and doors, and then right after that it's additions, I could see how that maybe is a bit of a jump to kind of a different, whole different scope of work entirely. But we simply put it there. I think our thinking was just because, you know, it is, if you are making an addition, we're assuming that the contractor or the applicant who's applying for that project is doing it to a building that currently exists. So that's why we put it there. If you're thinking that maybe there should be a bit more distinction, or it's not as clear as to why that's there, then that's something that we can look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if I would suggest to include another guideline that gives a little bit more guidance on that, and I know it would need to follow under the excuse me, the come before with a come before the council with a certificate of appropriateness. And I know that you know, we're not trying to create a false sense of history as well. So having a change in design or or construction just to designate that.
Commissioners, other comments? Mr. Skalecki, I'd like to say that I thought the design guidelines were very well written, especially considering this is a unusual district to kind of try and cover from a perspective of the different character that exists within the district itself. So I appreciate your hard work in putting together a good set of design guidelines. I wish that all of our districts had design guidelines that were this well written. I think they're very clear, and I do appreciate that. I think that the division between new construction and existing buildings versus contributing and non-contributing, to me, it's an easier line for all of us to kind of enforce and to interpret. I think it's a little bit more accessible for the general public to understand. Sometimes contributing versus non-contributing structures. I mean, we've seen it in residential districts with garages. You know, is it contributing or non-contributing? That can get to be a real gray area. So I think it's very appropriate for this district. I also appreciated that the guidelines had a lot of photos. I think some of those images, especially early in their report, could be bigger. And I appreciate that because I think it helps people get a visual for the kinds of things that you're talking about. So I appreciated that there's good visuals associated in here. I do also, I appreciate the comments about additions versus new construction because I do think that it could probably be a little clearer. I think additions should be treated a little bit differently than new construction. So I think that it makes sense for them to have maybe their own section. But I think making it clearer that it's about new additions to existing buildings rather than additions that may already exist on buildings and how that's treated. Because I think with the period of significance and knowing that many of these buildings have been changed over time, that could be something that could be difficult to clarify in the future is, you know, this was an existing addition, how does that get treated versus I'm putting on an addition, how does that get treated? So that might be something worth some clarification. Those were kind of my comments. Do any other commissioners have comments or feedback for Mr. Skalecki? Yes, Commissioner Melblum.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandbolt. Mr. Skalecki, I have one other question. You know, re-skimming through this today, I think you all do a really admirable job of keeping the design guidelines based on I think, technical issues, and you don't stray too much into aesthetics beyond continuity and I think matching the existing fabric. Do you think that there is any role in these guidelines to address general aesthetics beyond what are in here? I'm just thinking that there could be a lot of buildings that could be compliant with these guidelines, but could be very clumsy looking. So what recourse would staff and the commissioners have to address those items once these are adopted?
Commissioner Melblom, just a clarifying question. Is this more towards the guidelines for new construction, or is this when looking at the buildings currently and how they've changed, is that kind of?
I was thinking both. I could see it being different from one versus the other, certainly, but I think either one, because a clumsy addition or change to an existing building can make the entire existing building feel less desirable, maybe less pleasant neighbor. And then certainly new buildings can be designed nicely or not nicely. So maybe two slightly different considerations.
Yes, I do think I think I understand your question. I think
I can give you an example.
Sure, if you.
So you talk about parapets should be tall enough to hide rooftop equipment, which I think is admirable on its own. But sometimes when we make parapets on buildings, if we're asked to do that, the parapet is so tall that it looks, if you anthropomorphize a building, it looks like a giant forehead, maybe the rest of the building is squat. And it just looks visually imbalanced, whereas the building actually would look better if that parapet was lower, but then you would see the equipment. And so I'm wondering how we deal with those kinds of examples, or maybe that's the role of the commission, is to make those judgment calls.
Thanks for that example, Commissioner Melblom. And I think that's a good example of something that, would be evaluated through an application like that if it would come forward, you could evaluate on a case-by-case basis. So, if an example like that came forward and commissioners believed there was good precedent or good evidence to show that an exception could be granted to one of the guidelines, that's always something that could be considered through an application submission. So.
I do think it's important to remember that these are guidelines, and many of the applications still come to staff and to the commission for review prior, and we always have to interpret in the gray area a little bit. We cannot be making subjective decisions about what we think is good design and what's bad design, but we can be making decisions based on what we think is historically appropriate or not for a district. So there's definitely a fine line there, but I think that's where some of those decisions get made, is when a particular application comes through, we have the opportunity to review it and decide upon what's right for that particular building in that particular location. Andrea Burke.
I was going to answer your question, Commissioner Melblom, and maybe build off a little bit more, Vice Chair Sandbolt. But to that effect, the guidelines are meant to maintain historic character to maintain integrity in the district, which are based off the Secretary of the Interior standards. So the aesthetic point, without sounding harsh, doesn't necessarily come into play. It's that's sort of on the burden of the architect to come up with a well-designed building. But kind of what our parameters are whether or not the building meets the guidelines in order to maintain historic character, in order to preserve the integrity of the district. And that's kind of where our findings are centered on versus, and I can see your point of like, oh, that building is unbalanced, or that design feature is awkward. And unfortunately, the commission that's not really in their purview. Now, some of that comes out in some of the process that we have with the applicants, but at the same time, it is up to the architect and they're designing free will to design the building they want. It's just the guidelines that we have to achieve a certain task. So does that sort of make sense? Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments or feedback for Mr. Skolecki and the team? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Skolecki, did you get the feedback that you were hoping to hear tonight?
Believe so, yes. Thank you all
Okay.
for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your hard work on the district design guidelines. We appreciate having design guidelines for this district moving forward. All right, that concludes our discussion items for this evening. Do commissioners or staff have any announcements or additional commission business to discuss? Andrea Burke?
Thank you, Vice Chair Sambolt. I do. I have a number of announcements, and I'm going to try to speak into the mic to bring it closer since I failed on that the last meeting. First of all, I want to welcome our new commissioners. We have 3 new tonight. We've got Carol Merrill, we've got Kelly Fisher, and we have Travis. Why do I feel like I'm going to say this wrong? Hare. I said it right. Yes, thank you. I apologize. This is their first meeting tonight. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to have you here, and on our next meeting too, we'll have another commissioner join us, and we have a fully seated 10-member HPC. So very exciting. Preservation awards. We do have. I'm going to look to Rob, who I can't see behind a pylon, but we do have 2 volunteers. Is that right, Rob? Yes. Okay, we have 2 volunteers. So thank you, everyone. But these awards are being held mid-March. Encourage you all to attend. It is at the Capri Theater again. So just setting a reminder, I will continue to have reminders at these meetings. But for our new commissioners, these are awards sponsored by some of the different preservation groups around the city. The city helps out with them. And there are a number of projects that are reviewed to receive an award, as well as it's kind of like a lifetime achievement type of award. St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. So along this line, Carol has volunteered to join the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. This is a board that meets 3 times a year. In previous years, Commissioner Van Dryke was seated in this position, but I wanted to get it on the record to say that unless anybody has any objections, I know this is not typically my role, would like to appoint Carol to this position to sit on the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board and provide comment on behalf of the Minneapolis HPC. I'm going to say nods. That sounds good. Also, 5th Street Southeast survey. So work has begun on this survey, which is a resurvey of the 5th Street Southeast Historic District, one of our older districts that was designated in the 1970s. Bringing some of this narrative, survey, forms, pictures, everything into the 21st century, getting a little bit more history on it, with some logical next steps of being rewriting the design guidelines, but this is really the first step to it. But that work has begun. Our surveyors are getting very lucky with no snow, no leaves, and good weather, so that is begun. also wanted to update you on the NAPC, which is the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Forum Conference. This is held every 2 years. Minneapolis is in the running to hold this conference in 2026, and we are collaborating with the State Historic Preservation Office. We have been selected as a finalist, so the committee members are coming to Minneapolis next week. And staff from our team will be joining them on different tours and outings, showing them different sites around the city, explaining some of the history about the city in order to win their vote to bring this conference to Minneapolis in the summer of 2026. This is where different preservation professionals and commissioners from around the country come to collaborate, listen to sessions about kind of exactly what we do here today. So that will be we are doing that. I also wanted to give another piece of really good news. A little surprised by it, but it's good. So I had mentioned a few meetings back that we were awarded a legacy grant for writing an African American cultural and historic context study and survey. But what I didn't tell you is that we actually applied for 2 grants from 2 different sources to better our chances of hopefully doing this work, expecting that we wouldn't receive one. Well, we received both. So the other one was through the Underrepresented Communities Grant Program through the National Park Service. There was a national press release that came out last week notifying everybody that the city of Minneapolis had won an award in the amount of $75,000. And even better, it appears that we are able to get both and tweak some of our scope to make it a larger, better project. So very exciting, and thanks so much to Erin. Excuse me, one moment. To Erin for her work on preparing both of these grant applications and for navigating some of the good news to figure out how to do both. So more to come on that. This is brand new news that we just got this last week, so we're still kind of working through the communication lines on it. Elections for new seats. The intent is to hold nominations for elections for new seats at our next HPC meeting, which is on a Monday, February 26th. So please do not come on Tuesday. I'll send out some other reminders, but it is on a Monday. It's one of our 2 Monday meetings this year in 2024. But generally what happens for our new commissioners is we'll take verbal nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary. And then at the next meeting, we'll hold verbal votes for each of those seats. So just as a heads up, if you have people in mind that you would like to nominate, I think self-nominations are also welcome. I'm looking to Kendall, but I believe they are, yes. So keep that in mind for the next meeting. And that is the end of my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Some really exciting stuff in there and lots of updates, lots going on. So thanks for all the work that you guys have been doing to get us there. We're excited, especially about that grant. I'm really excited to see the work that that'll do. Really excited about that path that all of that's going down. Commissioners, any other announcements that we have not yet discussed? Any other new business or other matters that need to come before this meeting? Okay, there being no other business to come before this meeting, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the HPC will be Monday, February 26th, 2024. Thanks.